I just want to welcome y'all again. Those of you who made it up here and are upstairs in the room, those of you who are watching online, really glad that you're here with us or listening. One of the things that I feel strongly about is that I don't know where you are spiritually, what you believe about God, the church. I don't know your experiences or whatever, but you can belong before you believe, and to take a step and be around some people that we have a lot more in common than we do the differences. And our world likes to highlight that, all the differences, and try to divide us. But I'm just telling you, like, you're welcome here. We'd love for you to be here and just continue taking steps on a journey. We started this series a few weeks ago now, being known, and this kind of stemmed from what we've all gone through in life over particularly the last few years. In 2023, the Surgeon General came out and said that now, like, loneliness is an epidemic, and that people are experiencing isolation and an inadequacy in relationships and connections with other people. Been a lot of different statistics over the weeks, and one of the ones that was kind of interesting for me is like this Harvard graduate studies. They did this study, and like 60% of 18 to 25-year-olds, they feel extremely alone. And in that too, nearly half of adults and over half of college students, so we're talking about people who actually live in dorms around other people, say it's really hard to make friends. You know, I don't know about any of y'all, is it hard to make friends? Anybody want to be honest about that? I mean, it's kind of hard. And then one of the things for me that was interesting, like a survey said that 15% of men have no close relationships at all. This is like 5 times more than from 1990. And what I found most interesting in a different survey was by the Pew Research, and said that 61% of U.S. adults believe that having close friends is essential for living a fulfilling life, okay? But then nearly 60% of Americans said that they don't regularly engage in activity with a group or in community. So it's like there's a disconnect in our connection. And it's like, oh, I know I need this, but I don't have time for this, right? So over the last few weeks, we've just been kind of looking, because there's an underlying foundational truth in this. And I don't know what you believe about this, but I hope that you can see that we're kind of living out the truth that's in here. If you start at the very beginning of this, God creates everything, and he creates it all, and then we see this in Genesis 1:31. God saw all that he made, and it was very good. It was very good. And then in the midst of all the goodness, everything's great, perfection, all that he's made, God creates man, and then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him. The first reference, the first mention of anything bad has to do with a human being being alone. The Hebrew word for alone is actually pronounced bad, like it's bad, alone. And it's bad because we're made in the image of God, a triune God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. That relationship, connection. God's design for us is connection with him, connection with each other. Like I said, I don't know what you believe about this, and some of you might say, like, listen, I'm fine by myself. I am good. I don't need anyone. I'm better off alone. God has said that alone is bad. And we have a spiritual enemy who wants to disconnect us from our divine design, how we're made. And so this week, I want us to take a step back, because I think we can get so into our life and everything that's going on that we don't even realize what's happening. And for us just to step back and maybe have a broader perspective. I would hope that no matter where you are spiritually, what you believe, that we could all sit here and say, like, there is good and evil in this world. There's good and evil. The scriptures, Jesus talks about this. He says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. That we have this spiritual enemy who's trying to steal, to kill us, to kill you and me, to destroy our lives. He wants us to be isolated and alone because he knows this is bad. And we've talked about the fact that alone is so bad that it's killing us. Suicide is the second leading cause of death in the United States for 10 to 14-year-olds. It's the second leading cause of death in 25 to 34-year-olds. It's the third leading cause of death in 15 to 24-year-olds alone. In the scriptures, there's a letter written to this church in Ephesus, and in that is something that I think that we can take away in this whole perspective. He says, put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. This word schemes is methodia. It's where we get the word method. This strategy, this tactic, this calculated and intentional effort to deceive, to mislead. This is one of the things that I hope that we can all look at our own lives and look around in the world and go, my enemy schemes to mislead me. He's at it all the time. This intentional luring away and misleading and deceiving. And let me tell you, I don't get from here to over there like that. It's slow and methodical and intentional, one day at a time, one whisper at a time, one choice at a time, one decision at a time. He's a schemer, and he has a method that is strategic. It's calculated. He knows you. He knows the lies that you hold on to. I'm not good enough. It's never going to get any better. I should just give up. Specific schemes, temptations. He knows me. He's not going to put a line of Coke in front of me because I don't care about that. But he's like, you know what? You got a lot of work to do. And you need to do this. And you need to do that. Now, workaholism is a little more acceptable in our culture, but it's no different than addiction to a substance. He knows me. He knows you. It might be misleading you into chasing after more. Misleading and chasing after someone of the opposite sex, or I don't know. He just knows what it is for you. Misleading you to chase after security, or misleading you to think that you actually are in control. Misleading you to numb the pain. Strategic, calculated. For a lot of us, we're misled. We're being misled with this thing right here. We talked about this a little bit last week, but this thing right here, it's neutral. But yet we can use that and be involved with that in a way that we're distracted. We spread lies about other people. We gossip. We slander. This is really good too at having us compare ourselves to other people and their lives. It can misguide us into our addictions, whether it's shopping or porn, technology. I mean, it's easy to see, especially after 2010, we start to see some of the effects of, you don't have to believe any of this, but the more you use social media, the more your anxiety's going to increase. It's like fact. Satan's scheme is to deceive us into believing that we have more friends, that we have more followers, and in reality, those relationships are most likely, they're pretty shallow. We talked over a couple weeks ago about the importance of proximity and presence. See, technology can deceive us because we're connected to so many people, but yet, like being in the same room, being present in the conversation, being present with another person, so important. Face-to-face interaction. The average person spends over 2.5 hours on social media, but engages in less than 30 minutes of personal, meaningful conversation face-to-face. 2.5 hours a day on this, but yet less than 30 minutes of meaningful conversation. Technology, in theory, it connects us socially, but yet, how many times are we out to eat and we look across the way and there's 4 people sitting at a table and they're all this? Anybody let's practice confession today. Anyone do that? Yeah. Over the last 20 years, social isolation has increased by 24 hours a month. Social engagement with friends has decreased almost 20 hours a month. That's over the last 20 years. Then here's the thing. I know that we sit there and we're like, yeah, we're over it. Like, whatever, we've moved on. We're past this. It's 2025 now. We all experienced something that changed us during this pandemic. We all did, whether we realize it or not. And I know that we we enter into that. Listen, all the stuff that I'm talking about here, particularly when it comes to pandemic, like I'm not getting political, I'm not getting health and all this stuff. Like we can walk through life, having wisdom and living life out of concern for other people because we love them. And we can take this that we went through as well and just be so manipulated by fear and by lies. And what was hard for all of us is like the mixture of like, I don't know what to believe. I don't know if this is true. I don't know. Well, I'm going to do what they're saying over here, but they're saying this over here. I don't know. And then you put this phrase, this was carefully crafted. I don't know who came up with it, but I can tell you the enemy who was behind it, the phrase social distancing. It's very important because now that has we're good with that. Beyond germs and viruses, social distancing. Methods and schemes. We're being lured into loneliness. We are. That's his scheme, his misleading method. You step back even beyond that in the bigger picture. Satan knows our unique situation. We live in a Western culture that celebrates busy and individualism. We're all about self-reliance, self-help, self-serve. He lures us into this busyness and spending more time at work, and then we have all kinds of great things right now, Netflix and streaming and gaming and posting and scrolling. They entertain us away into isolation. Schemes, intentional methods to mislead. And isolation has implications. We've created lives with little time to connect with the people that we care about. We don't have time for people. We're being buried in our busyness, crushed by our calendars and commitments. We're being entertained by so many options and extras, and we're being lured away and lulled into living lives that they're really far away from what Jesus offers when he says, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. To such a point that maybe we forget why we're here. Now I know this is, I hope this is heavy because the last couple of weeks as I've been just praying through this, it's I feel so convicted. And here's the thing, Jesus knew this was gonna happen. He knew this, he talked about it. He talked about this, he said, people are gonna come and they're gonna claim, they're gonna say I'm the Messiah, I'm the one who's to come. They're gonna try to fool you. Those people are gonna come, the Jim Joneses, the Marshall Applewhites of Heaven's Gate, the David Koreshes of Waco, they're gonna come. He said there's gonna be wars and stories of wars. Just look at the news. He said there's gonna be famines and earthquakes. Nations will rise up against nations, kingdoms against kingdoms. And he says this, these things are like the first pains. I want you to pay attention to some of these words. These are like the first pains when something new is about to be born. Then people will arrest you, hand you over to be hurt, and kill you. They will hate you because you believe in me. At that time, many will lose their faith and they will turn against each other and hate each other. Many false prophets will come and cause many people to believe lies. Pain, hurt, bitterness, being misled and believing the lies of our enemy. And he says this, there'll be more and more evil in the world, so most people will stop showing their love for each other. I'm better off by myself, alone. Another translation says, because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Jesus uses this word cold because in ancient cultures, temperature was used to metaphorically describe emotional or spiritual states. So like warmth would be life and passion and fullness. Cold would be death, apathy, or indifference. Most people will stop showing their love for one another. Their love will grow cold. How does this play out for us? Because none of us would realize that we're heading in a direction, but it happens. And for most of us, it happens with an initial circumstance. Something that happens in our life. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one. Maybe it's a tragedy. Maybe it's a physical ailment or illness, a diagnosis. Maybe it's a betrayal. There's a circumstance that happens, and then right behind that comes pain and hurt. And then we don't know how to process that because we've got to keep going and we've got so many responsibilities, so many commitments. We can't stop. We got to keep going. And so this hurt and this pain is there, and we don't really know how to heal. And the enemy misleads us. And then before we know it, we're bitter. We're angry at God because how could he let this happen to me? How could he let this happen to that person? We're angry at other people because I can't believe they did this. And then that leads to apathy, indifference. We start to build walls up around us. We make excuses because it feels better to just be numb and not care than to still hurt. And we say to ourselves, I'm just better off alone. Alone isn't better, but leads us. It leads to losing love. This is exactly what Jesus is talking about. He's warning us about spiritual apathy, the dangers of allowing external pressures and internal struggles just continue on. He knows that our circumstances, that the hurt, that the pain, that the bitterness, they can suffocate our love and our commitment to God and to other people. Alone is bad. Together is better. Jesus, if you have a Bible, you can open it up to John 13. We're just going to be there for just a second and kind of look at this whole thing that happened. Jesus is celebrating the Passover meal with his disciples. They're in a room together. It's the Last Supper, and they're there remembering the Passover, but he's doing this in a different way. And he washes their feet before the meal, and they don't really understand what's going on. And he breaks the bread, and he says, "This is my body broken for you." This is a different Passover meal. This is the cup. This is my blood poured out for you. And the disciples partake in this meal, and Jesus says this: "A new command I give you, love one another. As I've loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another." By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples. Just pause on that for a second. Ask yourself this question. I wanted to ask myself this question. I'm known for blank. How would you fill in the blank? I'm known for accomplishments. I'm known for exceptional abilities. I'm known because of some title or some career. How do you fill in the blank? What if we're wanting to be known for anything and everything other than the one thing that Jesus commands us? What if we value being known for all this other stuff and not love? And not being a disciple of Jesus? A little later, a few chapters over, the meal is finished, and they're on their way walking through the Kidron Valley, and Jesus, he says this. This is, and I love this because he said this is command. It's not a suggestion. It's not a hint. It's not an option. This is my command. Love one another as I have loved you. He tells them again. And I think for us, the problem for us is that this feels like obligation. I have to do this? I mean, how many of us want more obligations in life? Anybody signing up for more? Like, give me more. I need more. Put more on my list. More to-dos. I have to. It's almost like, I use this word a lot. We just got voluntold. You know? How many of you like to be voluntold? You know, like, hey, I need you to do this. Would you like to volunteer to do this because you're going to do it, right? Jesus just voluntold us. Love one another. He goes on, he says, no one has greater love than this, to lay down his life for his friends. He's telling them what he's about to do. You're my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants anymore because a servant doesn't know what his master is doing. I've called you friends because I've made known to you everything I've heard from my Father. Friends. friends, phileo, close personal relationships, mutual attention and care. I think one of the things that we've maybe gotten so caught up in everything else, like the earliest communities of followers of Jesus knew that relationships were essential. That friendships weren't just social interactions, but spiritual inspiration for each other, because alone is bad. We need each other. We need to support each other. He says, you did not choose me, but I chose you. And some of you here, like today, need to know that God knows you. He chose you. He cares. He's pursuing you. He says, I appointed you to go and produce fruit, and that your fruit should remain. You didn't choose me, but I chose you, and I chose you to bear fruit. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Like fruit that lasts. It's all about people. You will live forever somewhere. And Jesus is emphasizing this. People. He said, this is what I command you, love one another. You can't love Jesus and not love people. You can't love God and not love people. If you look throughout this in the New Testament, there's 59 one another's. Forgive one another. Devote yourselves to one another. Pray for one another. Encourage one another. Submit to one another. Honor one another. We can't do any of that in isolation. That all involves people. I'll bring this up because this is great. You don't have to raise your hand, but how many of y'all are in debt, right? Anybody? Yep. Yeah, we don't like to talk about debt in church. We don't like to talk about money. Just don't talk about that. All right, don't talk about it. Just don't talk about it. Keep it in the dark. It'll get better if you just keep it in the dark. Whatever. I love this. Paul writes to the church in Rome. He says, let no debt remain outstanding. Pay up. But guess what? There's one debt that you are not going to be able to ever do enough of. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. We can't live this out without other people. So I want to encourage us today because I think it's so interesting. We talk about a couple thousand years, and you read the scriptures and you look at this and you go, wow, this is like, man, I just look from where I am and walking through things and being in ministry over the last 20 years and then going through a pandemic and all of this. And I sat down with one of y'all this week doing Who's Your One and just sat across the table and said, I never thought in my lifetime that there would be a point in a period where it was like, you can't sit across, like make disciples, but you can't like sit across from someone, you know? Because you got to be in isolation, you got to socially distance and all that stuff. I think we've been lured into this alone thing long enough. I'm just telling you right now. It has been a methodical scheme One thing after another after another. Look at this. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. We have an opportunity right now to respond and to fight against this scheme. People are losing their lives because they're alone. People are losing hope because they're alone. People think that they're the only one going through whatever it is that they're going through. It's not true. I'm going to encourage you this. I don't know if this is your first time here and you might not ever come back. I hope you do. But I'm going to encourage all of us, listen, if you are in town on a Sunday, be here. Be here. Don't look for other excuses, all the extras and this and that. Listen, this is a methodical plan, a scheme. And then I'm going to encourage you to beyond just 1 hour out of your 168 hours during the week to take a step and to engage in community outside of here one other time during the week. And you might say, listen, yeah, I'm busy. Yeah, and the world is busy and the world is alone. I want to come back to these words of Jesus because listen, I will tell you, this is what this all revolves around here, because you might still be standing off a little bit, or you might have like, Ryan, I've been hurt before and I just don't know people, and people are hard and they have problems. Well, yeah, so are you. Like, I'm difficult, Just, Jesus says this, he says, this is my command, love one another as I have loved you. This is what I want you to look at this next words up here. Go on to the next one. That's what it's about. How has Jesus loved you? He knows you. He knows your past. He knows your pain. He knows when you run and hide. He knows the things that you're still trying to hide. But he loved you so much that he gave his life to make a way for you to be in relationship with God and not separated by your sin. What does that mean to you? Jesus saying, as I have loved you. Do you know the depth and the width and the height and the length of that love for you? A love that never changes based upon what you do or don't do. Father God, thank you for love. Thank you for the truth. And I ask today that you help us to see and to understand that there's been a scheme, there's been a method playing out. And Satan's been trying to do this over and over in subtle little tactics in our life. And I just want to take a minute for those that are followers of Jesus. Just a day, I think this is so important. And just keep your head bowed and your eyes closed. But